let's talk about the take-home applications and recommendations for nitrate or beetroot supplementation. So we do know that if somebody takes in a nice concentrated form of nitrates, that it does significantly impact and increase plasma nitrites, which then is reduced to nitric oxide. To give you some perspective, because we don't work in millimoles, that's roughly equivalent to half a liter of beetroot juice or so. These levels are going to peak. This part is critical. It's going to peak within 2 to 4 hours of ingestion. Okay, so if you slam a half a liter of beetroot juice 30 minutes before your event, it's not going to peak. And not only is that going to be tough on your digestive system, you're missing the opportunity, that window of opportunity for those nitrate levels to peak. So you got to plan this out a little bit. You're going to want to take nitrates in the neighborhood of 3 hours prior to when you need it. And for a lot of people, that's going to be the start of their events. Okay? It will remain elevated for 6 to 8 hours. So for those longer endurance events, there's no need to re-supplement partway through. You wouldn't want to anyways, but luckily there's really not a need to. Those nitrite levels are going to come back down to pre-ingestion levels about 24 hours after the initial dose. Okay, so if you have a situation where you're doing back-to-back competitions, especially if you're at altitude, right? So you have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday situation, you might want to consider taking this every day of that event. Right? But most people don't tend to experience that. So once right before is going to be enough. So our recommendation is to consume nitrates, likely in the form of beetroot juice, 3 hours prior to competition. We do not have, we talked about this with caffeine, we don't have a dose-response relationship as of yet, meaning what is the peak? How much do I take in to get optimal performance benefits, where if I go over that, I'm not helping myself, I might run the risk of having some extra side effects, or below that, I'm not making the most of the supplement itself. We don't know what that is yet, okay? So once we know what that is, then we'll know what the optimal dose is. Okay, so we don't have the optimal dose, but what we do know is this much beetroot juice right here, that'll work, okay? Your performance should improve. And again, there's always an exception, but your performance should improve if you take in this much 3 hours prior to a competition. There is very clear benefit from our more aerobic activities, anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes. I would say anything higher than that, you're still likely going to see some benefits as well. It's just not quite as clear because we haven't had time to research every scenario, every sport of every duration, okay? It is possible there's going to be effects at very high intensity situations. I would say the research is very divided on this. And so it's possible. I'm not so willing to say it's likely, but it is possible. Theoretically, it should make sense because during high intensity exercise, oxygen is compromised, right? But weirdly, from a practical standpoint, the research doesn't solidly point to, yes, this is going to be beneficial. So in this case, are there going to be, is there likely to be super negative side effects? No, I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So try it and see how it works in practice first, but don't be so disappointed if it doesn't show an effect with you. Same with the intermittent, that goes along with the high intensity sort of thing. Longer duration, again, still being teased out, but I would say the arrow is pointing towards a pretty nice benefit for those individuals, especially if those longer duration events are happening at higher elevations, okay? So we're still kind of waiting to see what happens with this higher intensity, more intermittent sort of situation, okay? It's not clear if, let's just say you want to use this in practice in your workouts, if that's going to benefit your training. There's no study yet that is solidly saying yes or no to this. So for right now, the recommendation is really to keep this more for a competition rather than through training, although nothing about this is inherently dangerous for most people. So, I mean, if you want to have some beats before a workout, have at it. I don't see any reason for that to stop you. There is, and if you're kind of saying, well, maybe there is something I've heard about in the news before, It was once thought that nitrate exposure led to stomach cancer. Bacon got the biggest brunt of the blame for this one. So for a while, people were saying, don't eat bacon because of the nitrate content to it. But you've got to consider that the type of source matters, right? And I'm not saying bacon. I'm not saying anything bad about bacon today, although keep it in moderation. That is a more synthetic form. It's used as a preservation agent versus natural. And again, that word kind of makes my skin crawl a little bit, but there's a difference between the nitrates that are found in plants compared to the ones that are made up in a lab for the sake of using for, things like curing and preservation and things like that. So you do have to consider that. If you eat a bunch of beets, a bunch of rhubarb, and a bunch of whatever, should you be worried about stomach cancer? I would say probably not. So when you hear that criticism, just keep in the back of your mind that the type of source actually does matter in this case.